The Galactic Council's diplomatic ball was a spectacle I had only ever witnessed from the observation deck of my starship. Billions of credits had been poured into the event, towering crystalline chandeliers that refracted the nebulae beyond the station's viewport, holographic projections of distant worlds floating like ethereal spirits, and music that alternated between alien instruments I couldn't even name and human compositions that felt almost familiar. I had come as part of the Earth delegation, my uniform crisp and my hands slightly trembling. My job was simple: represent humanity without embarrassing ourselves. But my eyes weren't on politics or protocol. They were on her. She stood in the far corner of the ballroom, motionless. Her figure was slender but commanding, her posture so impossibly straight that it almost seemed like she was carved from living marble. Her skin was pale, not the typical human pale, but a porcelain-like shade that almost glowed under the soft lighting. Her hair was black as the void of space, flowing in smooth waves down her back. And her eyes, I couldn't describe them. They were deep and dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, and I felt a magnetic pull every time she glanced in my direction. But she didn't speak. She didn't smile. She didn't mingle. The other delegates whispered as they passed, some daring to glance her way, some deliberately avoiding her. A rumor had reached us earlier in the day. She was from the distant system of Nithara, a reclusive and secretive planet whose rulers were rarely seen outside their own world. And there was a darker whisper, one that made most of my colleagues step lightly. She was rumored to be a vampire. I laughed nervously when I heard it. A vampire in the 33rd century? Surely that was just political exaggeration. But now, staring at her from across the room, a strange chill settled in my chest. She was quiet, terrifyingly quiet, and undeniably fascinating. I almost didn't go. I had rehearsed countless ways to avoid the dance floor, telling myself that humans were not expected to mingle directly with alien royalty. But something in the stillness of her presence pushed me forward. I found my courage, or maybe recklessness, and walked toward her. "Would you care to dance?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. The room seemed to hush. Conversations faltered. Delegates turned to watch. I expected a refusal, or perhaps a polite nod that she would have to decline. But she tilted her head ever so slightly, studying me. Then, without a word, she placed a slender hand in mine. The air seemed to hum as we stepped onto the dance floor. The music shifted, a slow, almost hypnotic melody that made the entire hall fade into the background. I was acutely aware of her hand in mine, the faint pressure, the impossibly cold touch. Most humans would have recoiled. I didn't. "You are brave," she finally spoke, her voice low and melodic, like wind brushing across glass. "Or foolish." "I like to think brave," I replied, trying not to falter under the intensity of her gaze. She laughed then, a sound like chimes caught in a storm. It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't lighthearted either. It was a sound that suggested centuries of experience, centuries of seeing empires rise and fall. I realized then that she was far older than she appeared. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, tilting her head again. I've heard stories," I admitted cautiously. "Nithara's royalty?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "More than that. I am the vampirequeen of Nithara." The words hit me like a meteor strike. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but strangely, I didn't pull away. Instead, I took a steadying breath and said, "Then I'm honored, Your Majesty." For a heartbeat, she regarded me silently. Then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned closer. Few humans have the courage, or perhaps the ignorance, to address me as an equal. I swallowed. I don't believe in fear. Only curiosity. Her eyes seemed to pierce into me, as if testing whether I was lying. Then she nodded slightly and let the dance continue. As we moved together, I began to notice the details of her presence. The faint scent of something earthy and ancient, like forests untouched by time. The almost imperceptible pulse beneath her skin. And the subtle shimmer of her clothing, as though it was woven from starlight itself. Every motion she made was precise, deliberate, and somehow mesmerizing. "You are different from other humans," she said quietly. "I could say the same about you," I replied. She laughed again, a soft, melodic sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Then she pulled back slightly, just enough to look into my eyes. "Why did you ask me to dance, knowing what I am?" I hesitated. How could I explain it? That I felt drawn to her, as if something in the universe itself wanted us to meet? That I sensed something beyond centuries of myth and bloodlust? Because sometimes the most dangerous things are the most fascinating. And I wanted to know if the stories were true. Her gaze sharpened, assessing me. "And are they?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I think I'd like to find out with your permission." She studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she extended her hand again. "You are reckless. And you are patient," I said with a small grin. She inclined her head slightly. "Perhaps. But it is not often that I allow humans into my personal space." The dance continued, and with every step, I realized that the ballroom, the delegates, the politics, all of it had fallen away. For the first time, I was seeing someone not as a political entity or a rumor, but as a being complex, powerful, and real. After what felt like hours, though in reality could have been minutes, she finally spoke again. "You must know, once humans touch my world, there is no turning back." "I think I understand," I said. "And I accept it." Her eyes softened, just slightly. "Few dare to say that. Even fewer mean it." A silence fell between us, comfortable and tense all at once. Then, without warning, she leaned close. Her lips brushed my ear as she whispered, "Meet me in the gardens after the ball. There are things you must see. Things humans are rarely permitted to witness." Before I could respond, she withdrew and disappeared back into the crowd, leaving me stunned, breathless, and inexplicably exhilarated. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I managed polite conversation with other delegates, tried not to stumble over my words, and kept sneaking glances at the far corner where she had been standing. But she was gone. When the ball finally ended, I made my way to the gardens. The station's observation deck opened onto a terrace filled with exotic flora, some native to Earth, some entirely alien. Bioluminescent plants glowed softly under the twin moons of Nithara, and a gentle breeze carried scents I couldn't name. And there she was, waiting for me. The shadows seemed to cling to her, wrapping around her like a cloak, and yet she looked impossibly serene. "You came," she said simply. "I said I would," I replied. She nodded once, as if that settled something unspoken. Then she gestured toward the center of the garden. There, a pool of water reflected the moons above, shimmering with a faint golden light. "This is the heart of Nithara," she explained. "It is the source of my people's strength and my immortality." I stepped closer, peering into the water. It seemed to pulse, alive with a rhythm that echoed in my chest. "It's beautiful," I murmured. She placed a hand gently on the surface, and the water shimmered, showing visions of her planet. Vast forests of crystalline trees, cities carved into mountains that floated above clouds, and rivers that glowed with a faint luminescence. Then the images shifted, battles long past, rituals older than memory, the rise and fall of empires. I realized with a shock that the visions weren't just history, They were experiences she had lived. "Do you see why I am feared?" she asked softly. I think I understand," I said, overwhelmed by the depth of it all. "But I am not afraid." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the air between us seemed to vibrate. "You are bold, human. Bold enough to enter my world without fear, and wise enough to respect it. That is rare." "I want to learn," I said. "About you, about your people, about everything." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this. Knowledge comes at a price. The closer you are to my world, the more it changes you. You may never see the universe the same way again." "I accept it," I said without hesitation. A faint smile curved her lips. "Then follow me." She led me through the gardens, past pools of glowing water and trees that hummed softly, to a secluded pavilion. There, the air was thick with a strange, intoxicating energy. She turned to me, her expression serious. "I will teach you what it means to live among the immortals. But first you must drink." I froze. My mind screamed, but curiosity won over fear. Drink. Yes. To truly understand, to walk in my world, you must share my essence, if only for a moment. I hesitated. Every warning I had ever been taught about alien biology, about vampiric myths, flashed in my mind. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw something more: trust. Invitation. A strange, intoxicating certainty. "I trust you," I said, stepping closer. She smiled then, genuine and rare. "Then let it begin." The process was unlike anything I had ever experienced. A warmth spread through me, a flood of sensation that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Time seemed to stretch and twist. I felt her memories, her triumphs, her losses, the weight of centuries pressing against my mind. But I survived. And when it ended, I felt changed, stronger, more aware, connected to the universe in ways I could not have imagined. She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching mine. "You endured it. Few humans do." "I feel everything," I admitted, awestruck. She nodded. "Good. Then you are ready." From that night onward, nothing would be the same. The quiet alien woman who had accepted my invitation to dance was no longer just a mysterious figure at a diplomatic ball. She was a queen, a predator, an immortal being whose world I now shared. And somehow that was exactly where I belonged. In the weeks that followed, I learned the subtleties of her culture, the rhythm of her people, the responsibilities of immortality. I walked beside her through Nithra's ancient forests, attended councils where my voice was heard alongside hers, and even faced dangers that would have killed any ordinary human. And through it all, the dance, the simple act that had started it all, remained our connection, a reminder that courage, curiosity, and a single invitation could change the course of a life, or several lifetimes. And so I danced. Always. Because once you step into a world like hers, there is no turning back. And I wouldn't have it any other way.